ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the World Talk. I'm standing in for your usual host, Carlos, today. My name is Daniel Singoff, joined by Sean Bailey on my left and Salvador Chalaga Garcia on my right. So, the main issue that we will be discussing today is big tech with a tie into free speech. So we're going to be taking a look at social media platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and more recent ones such as Parler, the more conservative-leaning app that was recently in controversy after it was banned by Amazon Web Services. We're also going to be looking at large companies like Google and its parent company Alphabet. And we're going to be taking a look at data, user privacy, advertising, and just a general overview and maybe a little bit more specific insight into how companies use our data and how we can protect our data. So, starting off, we're going to take a look at Facebook, because Facebook is pretty big and in the past few years has been pretty controversial. As it stands, it has more than hundreds of millions of registered active users and has been a pretty dominant force in social media for the past almost 20 years now. However, there have been multiple scandals that it has been embroiled in that time. Most recently, and most infamously, around 2018 to 2019, the Cambridge Analytica scandal, where it was revealed that in conjunction with a data research company called Cambridge Analytica, based out of the UK, Facebook had been collecting users' data, and it had been used for political targeting as well as certain campaigns such as that of then Senator Ted Cruz and presidential candidate Ted Cruz, as well as presidential candidate Donald Trump during the 2018 Republican primaries. So, what are your thoughts, Salvador, on things like the way our data is used by apps like Facebook? More generally, how do you think social media platforms should respond to data and how it's harvested?
Right now, we have a problem with these companies that are gigantic and they're collecting data and they're, I wouldn't say abuse the data, but they're collecting it from every single source and they're targeting specifically every person with the most personalized ads possible. So you might be talking about, let's say, a bag or a specific product that you want to buy. These social media companies, with that data, they're going to target you with specific ads about what you've been talking about. And that poses a risk to your privacy and other issues that we'll get into in the episode.
And it depends on the social media platform, doesn't it? I mean, certain platforms are known to use data more often or more types of data with more levels of creativity, let's say, compared to some others. And I believe, Sean, didn't you have a point on that?
To go back on Salva's point about collecting information, Carlos, back in when we had this topic first, he discussed that it would be a solution to this would probably be taxing data. This will limit the amount of data companies will collect, and it will limit the power of these companies like Google, Facebook, and the targeted ads.
I agree with that idea. I think we have mentioned it even on existing World Talk episodes a few times, but I agree with this, especially because as it stands, different platforms already collect different amounts of data, as we've just mentioned. I believe it's Apple's iMessage that collects only a few scant forms of data, and then you have differences in platforms like WhatsApp or Facebook, which collect a multitude of data, some of which isn't even specified in their privacy policy, and which is named so vaguely that it could be literally anything you do on their platform.
Yeah, Apple released some statistics. They showed their iMessage app only having 2 or 3 points that it collects data on, being your email address, your device ID, so you can contact other people. And also released what other apps collect. And WhatsApp, I think, had the second largest. It was collecting everything from your browser history to your contacts. But the scariest is Facebook Messenger app, I think it's called, or subsidiary of Facebook, which collects a lot of information and even can't specify enough information, as it just says all other information types, and has another one which says sensitive info. So it doesn't specify a whole lot, and it gives a bit of advertisement for Apple, as it shows its iMessenger app compared to other messenger apps.
Yeah, and let's not skip the fact that what these companies can do with the data, which is mostly they sell it to other companies, and then those other companies can do whatever they want with it. Let's say an insurance company may deny or limit coverage depending on the data that social media companies have gathered on you. An insurance policy may determine that your cancer may or may not be worth covering. That's the problem with these types of forms of collecting
Yeah,
data.
especially in the United States, with all the different healthcare providers and plans that you can get in the United States, there have been, throughout the decades, there have been multiple instances of different providers using data in order to market specific types of plans or regimens to patients or people with possible health ailments. It's scary because Facebook, for example, or Google used to be able to, I don't think they do it anymore, it's forbidden, I have to check on that, but they could literally see your search history, what you're searching for, symptoms of certain illnesses or diseases, and they would market medicine for those kinds of diseases or things like painkillers towards you.
To step away from the sort of dystopia look, in California, I think in 2016, a former lawyer, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but he had forced, I think, 3 laws into place. One being that you can choose not to have your information sold. So you click in your browser and go, don't sell my information. The second one would be you can basically go up to Google and go, show me the stuff you collected on me. And they have to show that. And this third law was, it was on the amount of information they can collect. They can collect a certain amount of information. And a couple of other states are adopting this.
Yeah, and before we start recording this episode, Daniel mentioned another story that was basically this father received a letter, was it from either Target or Costco? We can't pinpoint it down, but either one of those companies sent a letter or sent promotion material to this family for pregnancy or pregnancy-related products, and the father then responded with an angry letter saying that none of their family members were pregnant or anything alike. But it turns out that his daughter was actually pregnant and hadn't actually told him. And that's one of the examples that can happen with this use of your private data.
Exactly. It's pretty scary because you can have things that you don't want to reveal to people you don't want it to be revealed. In that particular instance, if you're a teenage girl and you're pregnant and you want to hide that from your father, maybe even you just don't want them to know because you're waiting to reveal it to them if you're at a certain age, It can be really, really upsetting because suddenly this very personal fact about yourself is ousted. And this does kind of tie in, again, to the thing with providers and marketing medicine. It is kind of, like Sean said, a little bit dystopian in that sense because they can pick up the most sensitive information about not just you, but your body and your health.
If you go back to Facebook, back in 2012, 2013, they had a terms of service update where they would connect your credit card to your Facebook account. So your friends and family could see what you were buying. Now, this ruined several engagement parties and several other Christmases and birthdays, as you'd see your loved one buying an engagement ring for $2,000 and it'd show up everywhere. And they had not really, they sort of just enabled this automatically due to their terms and services update. And so this information from everything from what you're buying to sometimes I'll be talking about something, not posting it or Googling it, and I get ads for it. It's, again, a bit dystopian.
Yeah, well, I'd like to move the discussion on from there if that's all right with both of you. So next we'd like to talk about free speech. So we want to take a look at social media platforms in particular, so Twitter, Facebook, Parler, and we want to look at free speech and the ability to, the distinction between an opinion or a lie, things like fact checkers as well, and also censorship, which is a big issue, particularly in countries like or in regions like Taiwan and Hong Kong, where unfortunately, due to the looming presence of things like China and the CCCP, there are issues with certain types of data about activism or about ongoing political events being censored within those regions simply because they go against something that they may not want the people of those regions to know. I believe this is also an issue in Uganda, is it not?
Yeah, they banned Twitter during their president elections, and Twitter this was a couple of days before after they banned Trump, and they had gone on the official Twitter account and been complaining about Uganda censoring them. And this was, Ugandan president said that they were supposed to increase freedom of speech by limiting freedom of speech of certain people, being Twitter. And it's a bit ironic of them banning the President of the United States and then complaining about being banned in Uganda. But I think it was only temporary, it was only during the election. And now it's over, I think Twitter's back up in Uganda.
The thing is, we can pinpoint a really specific point where Twitter has been getting more and more power over public discussion. I'd like to make this point is it's in May of last year when Donald Trump made a tweet about mail-in voting. And keep in mind this was in May before the election took place. And here's when actual discussions of mail-in voting were actually taking place. People were discussing if it was actually worth it making the election through it. And let's also mention the fact that a few months afterwards, New York City had problems with mail-in voting. So making a tweet about mail-in voting was actually sensible at this time. But what happened was that Twitter put a fact check label on the tweet. So when you click on the tweet, it would say get the facts about mail-in voting, and it would redirect and basically redirect you to a site that said what the opposite of what Donald Trump said. And then we get to the point that of politically biased fact checkers.
Well, on that particular point, when it comes to Trump and mail-in voting, I would like to say it wasn't just one tweet. It did start in May. However, we have seen in the time that led up to the election, Donald Trump did try numerous times to undercut the integrity of the election by saying that mail-in voting was inefficient, that it was prone to voter fraud and tampering. By not just that, but also using his account, he would also like and retweet multiple tweets showing what allegedly were videos or evidence of tampering. So, there were fake videos of ballots, these big bags of ballots supposedly just being destroyed or left out to, be incinerated somewhere, which were later proven false, but which were retweeted by President Trump, former President Trump now, during the election leading up to it. And that does cast a serious shadow over the election because you have to know right from wrong in an election. And when the sitting president does cast that sort of doubt, there is a need for fact checkers. That being said, you have a point about politically biased fact checkers, because as it stands, there are some that do attempt to keep a relatively moderate bias. They try to play both sides or just play no sides whatsoever. However, we have seen in the past that perhaps unfairly there have been numerous counts of fact checkers towards Donald Trump, even on matters or issues not related to the election.
Yeah, I mean, with social media and politics being so integrated, it's a bit weird how a social media platform has the power to just ban the President of the United States. And if in that case, if you're banning one person due to their political opinions, you should ban everyone then.
Well,
if one can have and one cannot, you need to draw a line. And sometimes you have this grey area where is it a political opinion or is it just an opinion? And it's been very, very sort of leaning to left when it comes to, again, fact checkers, but also who to ban, who not to ban.
Yeah, that's the thing. Well, wait, sorry to interrupt you, but that's the thing is that these companies have been thrown into a role that can be easily abused by political bias. This role being them being the ultimate arbiters of truth, because they can decide what is truth and what is not truth in their own platforms. And this is a power that can be abused based on political bias, and what we've technically seen a couple of times.
Well, I do understand both of your points here. There have been instances where unfairly people have been censored by fact checkers or had their accounts restricted or deleted simply on account of what can not be anything more than simple political opinions or political viewpoints. However, again, with reference to Trump and actually quite a few current and former members of the GOP and Republicans, especially, we see nowadays conspiracy peddling politicians like Marjorie Taylor Greene, the new House representative. There are times when fact checkers are absolutely necessary, and for years now we have had, President Trump on Twitter constantly not just lying at times, but in every way spreading disinformation, often about opponents to anything that he would propose or about members of the Democratic Party. However, I do believe that the only reason he was banned was because at the point Twitter banned him, he'd already lost the election. He was continuing to spread what could be considered even more dangerous or volatile misinformation. And considering he was the outgoing president to now President Joe Biden, they probably saw it at the time as a safe move. However, as we've seen with all the discussions it sparked about being able to ban the sitting president, it is kind of a risky move. And
would you agree that banning certain people, especially the same political opinions, would create platforms like Parler and create movements like QAnon to grow bigger and bigger? If you're to ban all, let's say to ban all conservatives, they're going to make an app like Parler, and then people are going to go to more extreme measures if they can't voice their opinion on popular sites like Twitter or Facebook. And it creates a sort of echo chamber in these areas, and it leads to things like the insurrection of the Capitol.
You want to start first, Alpha?
Yeah, going into the subject of Parler, them being banned is actually a really concerning thing. Because let's look at this at the more of an economic perspective. Because let's say we got Twitter. It's its own thing, and for now, a bunch of conservatives have been complaining that it's been politically biased and it's been against their viewpoints. So what happens is they make their own website to compete. A website that says that they don't have these types of measures against these types of biased measures against them. So they make their own platform, which is pretty good in like economic perspective because it offers competition. Because if Parler was to be competitive against Twitter, Twitter would have to change its ways and improve. But what happens is that Twitter shuts down. Not Twitter specifically, but Parler gets shut down by this a group effort of big tech companies, kind of like Amazon or Apple, who both got rid of its application and its services in there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't necessarily agree with what was actually on Parler because, as we've seen, there have been a lot of reports of what actually went down. What was discussed on Parler was not just sensitive or misleading. At times, it could often be like, I believe, and this absolutely has to be fact-checked in and of itself, but I believe that, leading up to the Capitol riots on the 6th of January this year, people were using Parler as sort of a little bit of a hub to communicate throughout that as well.
And
again, that needs to be fact-checked.
Yeah, I'd like to just respond to that. But while that was true, I believe that the majority or a good significant part of the organization also took part on Facebook, and Facebook hasn't been reprimanded in any single way, like Parler was, and that's the thing. This type of tightly knit group of big tech companies are acted as like this big monopoly on big tech.
Yeah. Well, my personal, and sorry to cut you off, Sean, I just want to make a final closing bit here, but I do agree with you. I don't agree with the idea behind banning Parler, and that it is, it's a social media platform where people of similar viewpoints can discuss those viewpoints.
Mm-hmm.
However, my personal belief is that having platforms of either bias is completely, in a rather formal way, idiotic. Because all it does is, like Sean said, it creates an echo chamber regardless of what the bias is. Now, in that sense, Twitter does like to portray itself as a little bit more open and unbiased. However, as we've seen, there is at times what can be discerned to be something of a liberal bias, or at least a bias against conservatives. Now, whether or not this is because conservatives simply lie more, we can't really say for sure. However, I will say that, do you guys know of any conspiracy theories to the extent or scale or severity of QAnon from the left side?
Not particularly, but again, as I said, these websites like QAnon, Parler, and the sort of extreme measures they go to was created because of Twitter. If Twitter were to be more open and more political, unbiased, these echo chambers wouldn't have happened, and these movements wouldn't grow as strong. If you have a moderate who looks at Twitter and they go, well, they're censoring conservative voices, and they go over to a Parler and they go into QAnon, you create more of the people you want to ban. And again, as you said, having a QAnon and a Parler and then having a liberal equivalent to that is really, really bad. It separates and causes a bigger divide between liberals and conservatives.
But I just see this as like a lost opportunity because as Parler was infested with these people, these QAnon followers, the moderation itself of the app wasn't biased against liberal ideas. The thing is, liberals just didn't go there.
Yeah.
That was a missed opportunity. If more people went there and had more diversity of ideas, it would have been a more diverse platform that didn't censor conservative ideas, that didn't censor liberal ideas, and then it wouldn't have turned into an echo chamber. And that's why it's such a bad move banning Parler right now, because it's either going to make more conservatives more radical, and then just make the Twitter echo chamber even a more close-knit echo chamber.
Well, I'd like to, unfortunately, we're a little bit pressed for time, so I'd like to wrap up this particular subtopic here with, just your general thoughts on this. My personal belief is that politics should in no way be associated with social media because it does lead to issues like this. With politics, with echo chambers, in a time before social media, there was, of course, these issues with certain TV networks or newspapers, of course, having this bias. We saw it with things like Fox News, and we've seen it today with, again, continuing through past several decades, Fox News, but also CNN, MSNBC, all of these programs and networks, you can say to an extent, have a bias. However, social media has accentuated that to an extreme, the likes of which I think we've never seen before in at least American history, because the extent to which you can put an idea out there and have it amplified many times until it has almost no proof behind it, but a huge following, is concerning. So, just to close this episode off, what do you guys think on social media and its interaction with politics? Should it be allowed, or do you have any specific regulations in mind? Starting with you, Sean.
I think it should be allowed. Looking at how social media evolves, it gets people closer and closer together. When TV was first invented, you had, I think JFK was on the first televised debate. And now we're very used to see presidents on TV. I think we're going to have a similar move where social media and politics, especially in the US, are going to be more integrated. And I think it's a healthy, as it creates discussion. And if you have a politically unbiased system where people can talk and voice their ideas, and if someone has a really bad political belief, a really bad political idea, there will always be people on the platform that will tell them that your idea isn't very good, your idea is bad. And they can voice their bad ideas. By creating, again, the divide, having Parler and QAnon will further create an echo chamber and will create more and more sort of discourse. So the best way to think, what I think of it, is letting politics integrate with social media, but at least have it a bit like, here's political side of social media and here's a more social media side.
And you, Sal.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of these companies, we need better moderation and more competition. Because if we got more competition, these companies are going to be incentivized to change. And what we also need is more people challenging their own beliefs and following people that they don't necessarily agree with. It just to generate more nuance in the discussion and not turn yourself into an echo chamber or have insane amounts of confirmation bias.
And just one more thing from each of you. Sean and Salva, what are your thoughts on politicians and campaigns being allowed on social media? Because we have seen, in 2016 and 2020, social media did play a very large role in that. Sean?
I think if you're having a campaign on social media, it needs to be clear that that's your campaign. It shouldn't be the sort of like, you like this sort of politics that will lead you down a rabbit hole to the politician, like we saw with the Cambridge Analytica. And it should be very clear that these political campaigns are targeted towards people who are not, people who can vote, to people who are in the state, and people who probably aren't as extreme. So extreme accounts wouldn't get as much political campaign ads and such.
And you, Salva?
Definitely get rid of the targeted political campaign ads. Definitely get rid of those. But we also need a more level playing field, because I don't know if you guys remember, but one of the TOS changes for Facebook made one of Trump's ads on immigration. They banned. I don't know if they banned it, but they made it, got rid of them. Get rid of it. But yeah, we both need we need to, since people are gonna share their political views in social media, and they're gonna share posts from their politicians. That should be allowed. But targeted ads is one of the things that definitely leads to more of confirmation bias and radicalization.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for watching. That has been today's episode of The World Talk. We hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.